So following speculation surrounding the mysterious Star Wars Maverick video game project, we finally have some details. It'll be a game about starfighter pilots. But its campaign will only be a few hours long, and its primary focus will be on multiplayer. Guys, I thought we went through this already. After 5 years of possessing the Star Wars license, EA has seen fit to produce a total of 3 games. Just 3. And out of those 3, only 2 seem to have any real love from the fans, those being Jedi Fallen Order and Battlefront 2, the latter of which we'll be talking about today. Because while the multiplayer is thriving and fun for fans thanks to notable improvements and new content, the campaign is a part of the game which performed a complete pratfall upon release and never picked itself back up. Welcome to Campaign Critique, a series where we analyse and review the stories told in video games, both good and bad. Battlefront 2 unfortunately falls into the bad category, which is a massive shame considering the potential of its premise, playing as an Imperial loyalist who switches sides to the Rebellion. All the potential was there for fantastic character and thematic exploration, and all of that potential was pretty much squandered. The campaign starts reasonably well, with Iden being interrogated by rebel forces sometime before the Battle of Endor. While the plotting and dialogue is pretty standard stuff, the structure of the first action set piece is pretty well done. Sneaking around as Iden's droid, although I do find it pretty weird that the droid is just called droid, then some stealthy segments with Iden herself, and then some good old Star Wars running and gunning. It all looks nice and flashy and is generally well directed. However, it's all a little meaningless when the story jumps ahead to the Battle of Endor anyway. Yeah, get used to abrupt time jumps, by the way. Everything this opening mission establishes either doesn't end up mattering or is established again, but better in the second mission. Firstly, Iden being an elite special forces soldier for the Empire is merely told to us through dialogue in the first mission, but in this battle we actually get to see what makes Inferno Squad more capable than the average stormtrooper, although that's not exactly a very high bar. Secondly, Iden's whole infiltration of the rebel ship is to erase intel which would reveal the Empire setting a trap for the rebels at Endor, but we only see the payoff to that in Return of the Jedi and not this story. The first mission, while well structured from a gameplay point of view, is a complete false start to the story. Seeing the Battle of Endor from the other side, including the famous set pieces and imagery, would not only have been loads of fun, but also the perfect way to set up the Imperial viewpoint of this conflict and kick things off with a bang. Having retreated from Endor, it looks like we're actually getting somewhere, and for a brief moment the campaign really comes alive. We get a fun space battle around a shipyard and some organic story points unfold. The messenger droid intimidating Iden, other officers and commanders scolding her for asking too many questions. They're little things, but it plants the seed for an eventual conflict Iden will no doubt have with the Empire at large. But soon after we run into the main problem with Battlefront 2's campaign when we switch to playing as Luke Skywalker. You see, Battlefront 2's campaign isn't really designed to tell a story. It's designed as yet another advert for Battlefront 2's multiplayer. Oh, you think playing as Luke Skywalker is fun? Well, guess what? You can do that even more in multiplayer. The interplay between Luke and Inferno Squad member Del is pretty well done, but what we're missing here is a true understanding of the Imperial perspective. We get a hint that Del has grown up being told to fear the Jedi, but it takes very little from Luke to actually shake this belief, which would have been ingrained within Del from a very young age. As a story point and motivation for Del's turn, it works in the moment, but in context, not so much. What also feels super disjointed is the lack of interaction with Del before and after this mission encountering Luke. We just return to the conference table with not a word exchanged between Del and Iden. The pieces are there for what comes next, but it never really comes together. The following mission on Iden's homeworld is where things start to really fall apart. Up until this point, the story has sort of worked. While it's been messy in terms of plotting, the character beats are there to a point where we can see how they could build to Iden and Del's allegiances shifting. But the mission at Vardos neuters it all. Iden is shocked when her father oversees a devastating attack on her homeworld, and while on the surface, Iden and Del suddenly make the choice to defy orders and go rogue. It's just way too damn quick. It feels like there are scenes missing here. The Empire using superweapons to devastate a planet is all too familiar to us Star Wars fans, but it's a shocking revelation to Iden and Del. Iden and Del, who began the story as part of a mission to defend the Death Star. The ideological reason Iden and Del believed in the Empire in the first place and saw it as preferable to the Rebellion is never firmly established, and so them being shocked over this is kind of confusing. From here, Iden and Del gunning down their former comrades without a moment's pause also feels really odd. These two may have even known some of these guys by name, and yet having to open fire on troops they've previously stood shoulder to shoulder with on the battlefield never comes up. After escaping Vardo, Iden and Del quickly decide to reach out to the rebellion, which again is way too fast. Disobeying orders you disagree with and betraying your entire nation are two very different things. But from here on out, the fast forward button seems to be permanently held down, because not only does Lando Calrissian not suspect Iden of any ill intentions, but even sees fit to grant her an X-Wing fighter to assist in an operation around Naboo. This is simply absurd. The rebels, if they have any brain cells, would not trust Iden Versio. While the opening mission was ultimately meaningless, a really good aspect of it was the dynamic between Iden and the rebel interrogating her. He doesn't attempt to threaten or intimidate her, but he also doesn't trust her. The rebels aren't barbaric, but they're also not stupid. Then it's another space battle, and we drop onto Naboo to meet Princess Leia. Once again, the apparent need to show off the heroes available in multiplayer means we lose focus with our protagonist. She's just made a crucial, life-changing decision to switch sides. We should be with her, exploring the complex feelings she must be having right now. But instead, we spend the entirety of the Naboo mission playing as Princess Leia. Incidentally, during my playthrough, there was a strange bug which caused the stormtroopers to float around after being shot. Was pretty amusing. After the battle, there's some lip service paid to the moral complexity of Iden joining the rebels. Iden is responsible for many rebel deaths, and thus how can Leia even trust her intentions are genuine? All of this is contemplated in about 3 sentences worth of dialogue. 3 sentences. This should be the core dramatic conflict of the entire second act of this story, but it's simply brushed aside so we can get to another hero. The abrupt 8-month time jump is like plot whiplash. The character conflicts with Hask and Admiral Versio, the question of whether to trust Iden and Del, all of the dramatic tension, what little there was, has just disappeared. It feels like we just jumped to halfway through the second installment of a trilogy. We then jump to Han Solo on Takodana in search of some intel which can help liberate the Wookiee homeworld of Kashyyyk. The mission is fun enough, with some enjoyable dialogue and characters, made even more entertaining thanks to the weird body physics bugs which were persisting through my playthrough, but none of this has anything to do with, well, anything. Why Kashyyyk is important in this story is never clarified, and we don't even go to Kashyyyk later in this story. It's yet again just another excuse to show off Han Solo and fly the Millennium Falcon. The intel also leads Iden and Del to Bespin, where they attempt to apprehend Hask. And it was at this point I realised what weak villains Hask and Admiral Versio are. They basically disappear from the story until they're needed again. As antagonists, we never see them do anything to actively impede Iden or the rebels. The sense of betrayal Hask must feel is barely mentioned or explored, and Iden seems to suffer no consequences from her father. After Iden and Del fight their way off Bespin, we then jump yet again to Lando and play him for a mission as he takes down a weapons factory on Sullust. Much like the Han Solo mission, this is actually a lot of fun, and the dialogue between Lando and Shreve is very entertaining. Billy D. Williams is still as charming and cool as ever. I even really like the level design, with an impending volcanic eruption escalating the stakes of the action nicely. But what holds this and the Bespin mission back is the lack of the bigger picture. There are some throwaway lines here and there, but we're never given a real understanding of how these missions are furthering the larger rebel effort to finally defeat the Empire. They feel like side missions but are supposed to be part of the main story. This has the result of completely gutting the lead up to the Battle of Jakku. This is supposed to be the decisive battle of the war which can defeat the Empire once and for all, which we are told about 2 minutes before it starts. Could you imagine if the first Star Wars movie worked like this? Lots of fights and skirmishes, and then suddenly Princess Leia was like, by the way, there's a big space station called the Death Star, taking that down would be really good, and then immediately cutting to the Battle of Yavin? That's effectively what happens here. This is also where the level design massively lets down the climax as well. Up until this point, the missions of Battlefront 2 have been pretty well designed, with solid shooting mechanics and spectacular set pieces throughout. But here, at the final battle to bring down the Empire, we mostly just fly around running support. Iden plays no part in determining the outcome of the battle. Whether her X-Wing is shot down or not, the rebels would win regardless. The final confrontation with her father is also really weak. Because he's been absent for so long, and Iden has barely even mentioned him until this point, there's no emotional climax here. We don't have a real emotional connection between father and daughter. We have no strong feelings about Admiral Versio one way or the other, and so him choosing to go down with his ship has no impact. Iden also seemed to get over the death of her father pretty damn fast. By the time the battle ends, the cutscene plays this as some kind of immense victory, several characters exclaiming, "It's over." But without any kind of real build-up or established stakes, the catharsis the player is meant to feel along with the main characters just doesn't happen. But at least we've reached the end. The Empire is defeated, Iden has become a hero to the rebellion, the girl gets the guy, the music swells and we can fade out to the credits. Right? Well, no, because decades later, We rejoin Iden, who now has a daughter and is helping the Resistance against the First Order. So you know how I said the 8-month time jump felt like we just skipped to the second installment of a trilogy? Well, now imagine skipping to an entirely new trilogy. Seriously, what if Empire Strikes Back did this? Leia rescues Luke from Bespin and then the next scene takes place during The Last Jedi. Once again we lose all the dramatic tension that's been built up, if any, and start yet again. The original crux of an Imperial soldier switching sides has now disappeared and we have a totally different story happening here. We kick off with Kylo Ren extracting some intel from Del's mind in a pretty inventive level. Iden now has a daughter named Zay, who she's been grooming to become a capable Resistance fighter in her own right. Much like the drama between Iden and her father, we have no investment in the relationship between Iden and Zay, this time because the entire relationship is just thrown at us in the last act of this campaign. Another space battle and ground battle later, and Iden and Zay reach Hask's Star Destroyer to disable it. Meanwhile, the events of The Force Awakens transpire somewhere in the background. There's a brief tower defense section and then the ultimate confrontation with Hask. While Hask is finally killed, Iden is mortally wounded in the fight. I sound like a broken record at this point, but none of this has any impact. Hask is a weak villain whose drama with Iden has never been explored, and we haven't spent enough time with Iden and Zay to really invest in their relationship. It all feels like a damp squib of an ending, and yes, this is the ending. A tower defense section and then rushing off to tie in with the beginning of The Last Jedi. The downfall of the Empire apparently wasn't good enough. Instead we end with Zay, who gets over her mother's death just as fast as Iden got over her father's death, I guess it runs in the family, being ordered by Leia to go off to the Outer Rim and find allies for the Resistance.
Well, that was fucking dreadful.
All I can say about Battlefront 2's campaign is that it's a massive shame. This game had a fantastic story concept, but utterly failed to live up to its potential. There are plenty of enjoyable characters and missions, but the mandates to drag the story into advertisements for the multiplayer distract from the core drama and turn the plotting and pacing into a mess. If they wanted to showcase their heroes and levels, why not tell an anthology like the animated Clone Wars show? Tell lots of smaller episodic stories instead. Iden Versio and her story feels much more suited to an Uncharted or Tomb Raider style single player game, a cinematic campaign which could showcase just as much action spectacle but also develop its characters and themes in more depth. In the end, despite the flashy visuals, solid shooting and enjoyable action set pieces, Battlefront 2's campaign ultimately feels empty. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this pilot of sorts for this new series. If you want to see more from the channel, subscribe and hit the bell icon to stay up to date with all the new uploads. Until next time, have a good one, live long and prosper, and may the Force be with you.